I like to listen to music. I want it to fill the space like Christie's trumpet filled it today, because that's when you can really hear music. Some people would say that I like to listen to my music loud. I just say I like to listen to it full. I can't always do that at home. When Jen is home, she is either watching TV or reading a book or reading her phone or in the kitchen working or on the computer working, doing things for which my full music might not be perfectly appreciated. So I have a good pair of headphones that I wear in that case. But the kids always know when Mom's not home. When Mom is away, the music will play. They'll come downstairs and they'll hear Bob Seger blasting or Alison Krauss really loud or maybe Verdi's Rigoletto. I have very eclectic tastes. And they will know, oh, Mom's not home, is she? So I really do not have a leg to stand on to ever complain about somebody listening to their music loudly, because that person is often me. And I'm not one really taken to complaining about folks. It kind of drives me crazy when people complain about each other all the time, complain about music that is not according to their taste. I get it. There's some music that is not even as wide and eclectic as my taste is. I go, oh, I don't care for that. But judgment-free zone. But I do have to wonder, and I've asked sometimes when I've been in the car with Jen, and when you feel the car about a half a mile behind you, and then it gets a quarter mile behind you, and your chest begins to resonate like it's a string bass being played with a tremolo. I said, Jen, do you think if an ambulance came up behind them, they'd hear it? Do you think if there were an emergency siren, they'd hear it? Do you think if that person decides to pass me and doesn't see me in their blind spot and begins to pull over, that if I honked the horn at them to save myself, that they would hear me? I'd like to think that all those sounds are loud enough that they would cut through, but I really don't know. I do know that it is important while I'm in the car to be able to hear all these different things going on around me to stay safe. Even things that I'd rather not hear, like those little clunkada in the car that are telling me something's about to go wrong. My idea sometimes of fixing the car is just turning the radio up so I don't hear what's going bad. I see some nodding. Hearing is important. So for the blind man that Lynn read to us about, hearing was everything. He couldn't see what was going on, but he could hear the crowds. He heard them buzzing. And he was able to ask, what's the buzz? Tell me what's happening. Throw a little Jesus Christ Superstar reference for fun. He just said, what's the ruckus? What's happening? And they said to him, Jesus of Nazareth is coming by. And because he could hear the crowd and thought to ask, then he was able to shout out, Son of David, have mercy on me. And because Jesus heard him, he stopped and was able to ask, what would you have me do for you? I would like to see again. And Jesus restores his sight. All because he could hear. Hearing is important. And now, Luke's story is based on the same story, but a different account of it in Mark's gospel. I probably have told you before that Mark is even though it's the second gospel in the New Testament, it's the first one written, and you can see that both Matthew and Luke have taken certain materials from Mark to be sort of the core of their stories. And then they have some source material that they have in common, so that when you compare Matthew and Luke, you can see, oh yeah, they shared that story. And then they each had their own stuff that they brought. All that just to say that there are many, many voices, many, many evangelists, many, many preachers in the Bible, lots to learn from all their different takes of some of the same stories. Mark gives the blind man in the story a name that maybe is familiar to you if you've been around the church long enough, Bartimaeus. If you remember that bar from like bar mitzvah means son, or Jesus bar Joseph, Jesus son of Joseph, you know that Bartimaeus is son of Timaeus. And Timaeus is not a Hebrew name. Timaeus is a Greek name. In fact, it's the name of one of Plato's dialogues, and a character within one of those dialogues. The Timaeus is a philosophical dialogue. And so by Mark naming him son of Timaeus, he's kind of lumping him in with Greek philosophy. And in Mark's story, when Jesus heals him, he stands up and he takes off his cloak and he leaves it. The cloak being like clothing of a Greek philosopher. So in Mark, the story almost serves as a polemic against, or a refutation of, seeing the world only in terms of Greek philosophy, leaving that behind for messianic faith, so that he goes from a spiritual blindness of a sort to a deeper sight in seeing Jesus. Luke is not a particularly spiritual gospel. Luke is a very down-to-earth, all about literal stuff gospel, where Matthew's Sermon on the Mount has, blessed are the poor in spirit. Luke just says, blessed are the poor, period. And woe to you who are rich. He has a lot to say about possessions and stuff in Luke's gospel. So there's a lot to this sight thing in the story. During COVID, Jen's van was getting to kind of its last legs. It was sucking up a lot of gas for one person. We weren't driving the kids around anymore. They were all driving their own cars. It was beginning to suck up a lot of money for maintenance. We decided we'd need to sell it, and we needed to go ahead and lease something for Jen, and we put in for a Chevy Trax. Because it was during COVID, there was one of these things where you could sort of enter a lottery. There were not very many vehicles to be had, and you could get any number of colors, and you wouldn't know for sure until it showed up. Any of you aware of that sort of weird stuff happening during COVID? Thankfully, she ended up with a gray that she liked instead of some other wackadoodle color. And it was a nice car. Its lease ended shortly, a short time ago, and we went to get another Trax because we liked it, and they have fixed up the Trax quite a bit since that first edition of it. And I thought, surely one of the things that they will have fixed is the driver's side visor. Because in the Trax that we had, if the sun was like right here, and you went to put down the visor and then pull it over, there was a gap here. In my Equinox, you can slide the visor, and it covers the gap. In the Trax, you went, and it didn't move. And you just had a gap, and it was very annoying. Very first world problems, right? And I thought, well, surely in the new Trax, they will have fixed this. We're going through all these cool things that have been improved, and just for fun, I put the driver's visor down and pulled it and went, still not. So what are you going to do? And if any of you work for GM and can put that in the suggestion box, that they need to fix that on the driver's visor or the Trax, please do that. Because seeing while you are driving is a very important thing. If the sun is in your eyes, even though Jen wears sunglasses, she doesn't have the big wraparound kinds. If the sun is right here, it doesn't matter what's there, right? Seeing is very important. We do all sorts of things to make sure that we can see, whether it's sun visors or sunglasses, or whether when it's dark we have headlights, we have street lights. If we need to be seen by others, we have tail lights so they see us in the fog. We have hopefully reflective paint on some of the lines on the roads, although coming back from Ann Arbor not too long ago, 23 was pretty terrible that way, and I had no idea where the lanes were, but we made it home anyway. Seeing while you're driving is very important. For those of you who park on the Slater Street side here, you know that as you're leaving this way, between the neighbor's bushes on this side and cars coming rather quickly around the bend this way, and if anybody is parked in the front, you're kind of doing a little sneaky sneak to make sure that you can see. And even when you see clear to turn left, you go with some haste because somebody might be barreling around the corner. You might remember our friend Bonnie Lenzian, those of you who have been around long enough, who lived in one of the houses that we owned for a stretch, how she ended up getting hit out here. She wasn't hurt, thankfully, but seeing is important. And Zacchaeus wanted to see. Now, why he didn't just wheedle his way through the crowd like a kid in fellowship hall making his way to the cookies, I don't know. He was short, right? He could have snuck through. And we're left in our sanctified imaginations to wonder maybe why. Maybe it was because he was a tax collector and people thought of him as a sinner and they would not take too kindly to his trying to elbow his way through the crowd, and they might have roughed him up or treated him poorly. Or maybe people wouldn't have treated him poorly, but he was self-conscious, as he knew what they all were thinking about him as he moved his way through. Maybe it was just easier to climb a tree as to do that. Or maybe Zacchaeus figured if he moved his way through the crowd and was just one more face, that Jesus wouldn't see him, and he wanted desperately to be seen. What better way to be seen than to climb a sycamore tree and be dangling out of the tree? We don't really know for sure. The story leaves it beautifully ambiguous. We can kind of think about it for ourselves. But it was important. It was important for him to see Jesus and for Jesus to see him. Important enough to Jesus that Jesus made his way over and said, Zacchaeus, Zacchaeus, you come down. There you go, for I'm going to your house today, right? He invited himself over for dinner. It takes a very special sort to invite yourself to dinner at somebody's house that's not family. Jesus could get away with that. It's important to hear. It's important to see. There's speaking of street signs and being able to see, there's a street sign on Power Road in Farmington Hills that I suspect is there because of me. When I was in my last semester of college, it was a protracted semester. I'd had a bad student teaching experience that I needed to repeat elsewhere. I had a piano jury that my piano professor, bless his heart, had way too much faith in me and had assigned me something that was way more than I could do well, and I was stressing out about it. It's the first movement of the Schumann Piano Concerto in A minor, the da-da-da-da-da. And I was a mess. I was commuting to Wayne from my folks' house in Farmington, and I was nearly home on Power Road, right near the elementary school where I had gone, and my grandparents' house, my mom's folks, and I began to fall asleep at the wheel. And I woke up in time to slam on the brakes, but not in time to not hit the van in front of me that was turning left into the school. Thankfully, I didn't hurt anybody. In fact, the van was hardly worse for the wear, but my little white Escort did exactly what it was supposed to do and crumpled very nicely. And not too long after that, a sign showed up on Power Road that said, "School entrance, 300 feet." Because I think they assumed that the school entrance had taken me by surprise when really the sign needed to say, "Stay awake, you idiot." Stay awake. Stay alert. Jesus was always awake for, alert to, the needs of those who were around him. Now, he was fully human, so that accounts for why just about every other chapter it seems like he's going up on a mountain to pray, or going away to rest, or going here for a retreat, or he constantly had to care for himself so that he didn't do like me and fall asleep at the wheel, so that he could be awake for and alert to the needs of those who were around him, whether it was that blind man, Bartimaeus, or whether it was Zacchaeus in the tree, or whether it was the woman who had been bleeding for years and years, and he felt the power coming forth from him. All those people he saw and heard and knew, he stayed awake. He stayed alert. And it seems to me that's what we're called to do as well. It's why we have Sabbath time. It's not just because God has some great ego, that God feels good when we stop and go to church and he goes, "Wow, I'm important." God already knows God's important. God doesn't need that. The Sabbath is made for us, not us for the Sabbath. Jesus said that numerous times. It's made for us to rest and care for ourselves so that we can stay awake, that we can stay alert, that we can hear the cries of the needy, that we can see the needs of the people who are right in front of us, and see those as opportunities for showing the glory of God. There's a story of a different blind man, right, in John's Gospel. It's such an important story. It takes up 3 whole chapters in John's Gospel. I think it's 6 through 9. And when the whole story begins, the disciples asked Jesus what we now know is a pretty stupid question, but at the time was a question that people asked a lot. Who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And I always imagined Jesus doing a big face palm. I don't know that he actually did, but he would have had reason to on any number of occasions. He says, nobody sinned. This guy didn't sin in the womb. That would be ridiculous. His parents didn't sin. His grandparents sinned. Nobody sinned. This is not what it's about. This is not an opportunity for judgment. This is an opportunity for mercy. And for me to display in serving this man the glory of God. All the opportunities that we have, the voices that we hear, the situations that we see, even when we can't solve them. Lord knows we can't solve everything, but we can attend to everyone, whether it's with a kind word or a prayer or a card or a favor, any number of things that we can do to stay awake and alert. Let us do that in our lives we might display the mercy and the glory of God. Let those who have ears to hear, hear. Let those who have hearts to feel, feel. Let those who have hands to work, work. And let those who have eyes to see, see. Amen.